I've been going through a rough patch with my wife recently, so I decided to put in more effort to be more emotionally available and help around the house. One day, as I was charging an old iPad for my son to use, I accidentally stumbled upon some messages from my wife's Facebook Messenger that was still logged in. It was with a guy named JBC from her hometown. The messages weren't completely inappropriate, but I made a mental note to keep an eye on this. The next day, I left her some sweet notes reminding her how much I appreciated her, and she was once again in the corner of the living room, texting her girlfriends. I took the boy's iPad to the office, opened up Facebook Messenger, and watched in real time as my wife tore me down. My flaws, my insecurities, and secrets I entrusted to my partner. I managed to take screenshots, but she was deleting them as the conversation was unfolding. I wasn't emotionally capable of confronting her, so I drank, trying to figure out what to do. "What's wrong?" she asked. I just had a bad day." A couple minutes later, I was watching the iPad as the train wreck kept unfolding. Messages that were clearly inappropriate, and my wife was completely into it. JBC even sprinkled some "I love yous" in there. So became the worst 2 weeks of my life, drinking and losing myself in the relationship. I consulted a lawyer and had him draft a strong separation agreement stating that she would move out. She would get weekend visitation, no child support in the interim until the divorce is final. I also found out that JBC was coming to town to spend a weekend of quality time with my wife in a nice hotel. The next day, she's buttering me up and wanting to take a spa weekend with our daughter to relax, and when she gets back, we can really focus on our marriage. I go along with it. At this point, most of my feelings for her are completely gone, and I'm just seething with anger like I've never felt before. The day arrives. I take the day off work and I withdraw half of any money in any accounts we are joined on, and I left hers alone. I stop by at Office Max and I print out about 75 pages of Facebook Messenger screenshots. She texts me that she's taking off and that she loves me. I tell her to have fun. At about 8:30, I show up to the hotel and call my wife's phone from the lobby, but it goes straight to voicemail. So I walk up to the front desk and I ask if I can use the phone to be connected to JBC's room. It rings 3 times, and he picks up. "Hello? JBC, can you send my wife down to the lobby, please?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "Okay then, I guess I'll have to call Mrs. JBC and get her down here." Totally a bluff. I knew he was married and I knew her first name, but that was it. "You got 5 minutes." Not even 2 minutes later, my wife comes walking out of the elevator looking a little flustered. It's not what it seems. I'm not here to argue. The things that are said in this pile of papers are what's going on. The only way I'm not giving a copy of this to our daughter, your parents, and emailing it to everyone we know is if you move out immediately. Her professional life is built up around her image, so I knew she would protect it at all costs. Here is a separation agreement that I think is more than fair considering what's going on. I'm going to need you to look this over, sign it, and leave it at the house when you get your stuff. Do you want to look through these screenshots? No. Okay, go have fun with JBC. Do not come back to the house or I'm going to send this to everyone. As I'm exiting the lobby, I can hear her start to have a breakdown. She texted and called over and over wanting to talk. I just turned the phone off, and by the time Monday afternoon rolled around, there were movers getting her stuff, and she delivered the agreement. She wants another chance. She wants her family back, but I have no intention of ever taking her back. I tell her she needs to set up marriage counseling on her own at a time that works for me. I tell her that I can't live with her, but she should be around the children to try and maintain a relationship with them. So starts our new normal of her coming over the house, cooking, and having dinner with the kids 3 nights a week. We went to marriage counseling. It consisted of her working through her issues with a therapist trying to figure out why she did it, her begging for forgiveness, and me stoically playing the victim. I was never going to give her another chance. All I wanted to do was kill time, establish myself as the primary caregiver to the kids, and establish her as not having residency in the house. After a few months, I go to my own therapist and get diagnosed with depression and PTSD. I ask my work if it's possible to go to part-time for the foreseeable future to deal with personal issues. 6 months of therapy go by. I told her that I couldn't forgive her right now and that I wanted an amicable divorce. But she is still the love of my life, and maybe someday we could give it another try. She was devastated, but agreed to the divorce if I promised to try again someday. Once the divorce was filed, I needed the kids to want to stay with me. So I left the Google search for "How to Survive Your Wife's Infidelity" up on the shared PC at home, and I left some printed out infidelity articles not so hidden in the kitchen. My daughter found them and came to me crying. I told her she wasn't supposed to find those, that mom made a mistake, that mom still loves her, and that I would always be here for her. My sweet daughter, who used to hold my wife in such high regard, now wouldn't talk to her without screaming, and it crushed her. Not surprisingly, when the court needed statements from the kids a few months later, little brother followed big sister's lead, and they both wanted to stay with dad in the house they grew up in. When the divorce was finalized, I got the house, I got primary custody of the kids, I got awarded generous child support due to the difference in our incomes due to me working part-time. So in the eyes of my kids, I'm the patron saint of fatherhood for taking the high road and always being there. In the eyes of my ex, I'm the one that got away and that she will always pine for. I make her believe that there will be a chance that we will get back together. But that is never going to happen. During the weekends, I, along with my sister and friend, usually went to town around 20 minutes away to go out and eat. It was a busy area, so there were many people on the streets asking for money. After a lot of fizzy drinks, we were walking to the nearest restroom, and my friend accidentally kicked over one of the man's pot of money, and it all went under this young guy's car. The man was still in his car, so luckily she could ask him to move so she could collect the money back. She knocked on his window and asked politely for him to move. He simply stared at her for a second and replied, "All right, young lady," with an extremely large grin on his face. At the time, my sister and I could tell something was up and that man was fishy. However, there wasn't much we could do to prove it. He reversed the car ever so slightly. My friend and I went over to pick up this man's money, and he was waiting angrily. My sister, however, refused to help collect the money, and that seemed very out of character for her, and I knew something was up. She proceeded to watch us pick up the money until she stormed over to the man's car parked elsewhere. The man turned on his car and drove away as fast as he could. My sister began yelling different slurs at him. She tells us that the man was taking photos of us from his car while we were leaning over to collect the money. As there was not much we could do, we just continued to complain about the man and how disgusting it was. After this encounter, we realized we started seeing the same white car around us. But we didn't think too much of it and made jokes that it was the creepy guy and he was coming to get us. About a week later, when all three of us returned to town to go to McDonald's, we saw the same homeless man outside, and he seemed to have changed places. As we walked past him, the man then whispered, "I pray for you, young girl," and tapped my friend's leg. We all stopped, scared and not sure what to do. But my sister had enough and asked him what he meant by that. He refused to respond, so we continued walking. Later the next evening, I received a FaceTime from my friend, and she seemed pretty shaken up, and she swears there's a person's silhouette in her back garden. I told her to show me, and from what I could see, there was. So my sister and I headed straight to her place and told her to lock the doors. We grouped up in her living room and debated on whether to call the police. We decided to stay with her for the night, just in case. As we all woke up in the morning and went outside before heading to school, we saw multiple sticky notes stuck to my friend's fence. It said simple compliments like beautiful and gorgeous, but the ones further down said more creepy things like soft skin. And then we read yellow polka dots. Strangely enough, my friend always had a liking for yellow polka dots. We asked her whether she maybe had a mad ex-boyfriend, but she claimed she hadn't been with someone for 2 years. We were all scared and confused until my sister brought up considering the drastic increase in that white car and that homeless man saying that to us in town. It could be that creepy man who took photos of us that day, and he may have seen her underwear. We took down the sticky notes after taking a photo of it just in case. I didn't see my friend in school for the next 5 days. I tried visiting and she let me in and locked the door. All the blinds were shut and her family still weren't back from their vacation. My friend explains how this man returned during the night to put sticky notes on her fence once again, spelling polka dots. I told her to call the police, but she refused. The next day, I convinced her to come along with me to talk to the homeless man and maybe we could find some answers. And luckily, he was still there. We asked him over and over to explain what he said last time or tell us if he knows about the man in the white car, but he wouldn't say anything. My sister stood at the other side of the road to keep watch. Suddenly, the man in the white car creeps up behind us, and my sister came running over and grabbed both of his arms and restrained them behind his back as if she was some kind of police officer. She told the man that she's not afraid to report him to the police and told him to get out of sight and never to disturb us again. The man was able to escape from her hold and got into his car quickly and drove away. We went over to the homeless man who seemed not only scared but guilty. We asked whether he knew that was going to happen, and he was surprisingly honest. The man said he was approached a few weeks ago by him, and said if he could help him lure in my friend, he'd pay him $600 in cash. So the homeless man agreed and got the money. He then said the man called himself Adam J. My friend seemed very shocked about that name. We asked what was going on, and she said Adam J was a kid back in school who kept trying to flirt with her after she rejected him, but that man looked nothing like him. My sister then let the homeless man off with a warning, and we all went back home. Truth is, we never heard whether it was that Adam J. He just vanished in that white car, and we never saw him again. My neighbor is one of those annoying wannabe YouTubers. Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to another crazy video! The Cinnamon Challenge! Let's go! Are you getting this? It can get tiring to watch him go about his shenanigans in the pursuit of viral fame. So when he knocked on my door the other day, he told me he was going away for a few weeks and asked that I get his mail. Honestly, it was a relief. I was afraid his stunts would wind up bleeding over into my life. Things were pretty normal for the first couple of days. He received a few bills, a bit of spam, and from what I could assume was a birthday card. And then, one evening, I got home to find a cardboard box waiting on his front porch. And in big letters was written, Return to sender. Now, I'm no small fry, but I admit I had trouble lifting the box on my own. It was really freaking heavy. Getting it across the road to my house was even harder. I decided I'd leave his package in my garage. It wasn't like I kept my car in there. It was because my garage door refused to open without a good thug and a whack. It was when I kicked the door again when I walked in that I lost my grip on the package and it fell to the ground and I heard a light crack inside. Shit. I hope I hadn't broken anything important, but figured I just wouldn't tell my neighbor about it and let him assume that the break happened en route. I dragged the box the rest of the way, setting it in the corner for whenever my neighbor would come back to claim it. And then I forgot all about it. Until a few days passed, that is. There was a horrible smell in my garage coming from the box in the corner. I remember thinking it must have been one of those meat of the month subscription boxes and thought it must have gone rancid from being left out for so long. I covered my nose as I approached the box with a pair of scissors in my hands. I probably wouldn't even have needed them to open it, as it had become soggy enough at the bottom to poke through with a finger. My scissors tore through the tape along the top of the cardboard box. I thought the smell couldn't get any worse, but as I flipped the flaps open, I discovered a whole new stink. I had a garbage bag in one hand and the strongest cleaner I could find in the other, and I had long rubber gloves on to keep my skin from having to touch what was inside. But as it turns out, I needed none of those things. You see, there was meat in that box, but it didn't come from a cow or a pig. No, it was worse than that. It was my neighbor, dead. Still in one piece, but dead. I caught the cops and they took me in for interrogation. It's kind of hard not to suspect the man with the corpse in his garage after all. Thankfully, they soon realized I wasn't involved. My DNA might have been all over that box. The smell might have left a mark throughout my house, but there was one piece of irrefutable evidence in my neighbor's own hands that proved my innocence. A vlogging camera. They showed me the footage only once. My neighbor was sitting in the box outside of a shipping facility, laughing as he told the world how he was going to mail himself across state lines. He brought pee bottles, food, a pillow, and a few flashlights. His friend, a guy I'd seen at his place several times to help with his stunts, closed the lid and presumably dropped him off the shipment. Throughout the next couple of hours, or days, I'm honestly not sure, my neighbor recorded a few short clips of his progress. Hey, what's up guys? I think I'm in a truck right now. I can feel it moving. Must be in a warehouse. Ooh, it's pretty warm in here. And then, on the last entry, the box toppled over. He broke his neck, and that was it. The camera recorded until either the memory card got too full or the battery had died. There's one thing I didn't tell the police after they showed me the video. One thing I heard in the footage that will haunt me until the day I die. Just after the tumble that broke his neck, I heard the familiar screeching sound of my garage door. During my early 20s, I worked as a meter reader in Iowa. I'm the person who records how much electricity, gas, or water you've used each month. The owner who signed up would give us consent and provide us with spare keys to enter if their meters were inside the house. Entering a home when nobody's there is something I never got used to. I hate basements. I've seen walls with roaches scurrying across, cobwebs so thick and dusty, rats and snakes and more strange things. But there was one basement that truly terrified me. It was an old apartment house. I entered the back door and found myself at the top of a staircase. I ran my hand along the wall until it grazed the light switch. I flipped the switch, but no lights turned on. I wasn't carrying a flashlight either, as the typical route involved 5 or 6 hours of walking. I did carry an old lantern with me, so I made my way down into the darkness. Once at the bottom, I discovered 2 doors. I chose the door on the right and found the meters in the far corner. As I entered the reeds, I began hearing noises coming from the other room. Something was moving, and there was whimpering that grew louder the longer I listened. I realized it was a dog and it sounded weak and distressed. I tried to open the door, but it was locked. At this point, the dog was scratching the other side of the door, and I felt helpless. And then, the sound stopped. I reported it when I got back into the office, but I couldn't shake the thought of it. So there I was, not long after, back within that basement. I kept my ears open for any sounds coming from the other room. This time I heard nothing, but I couldn't shake the memory of that dog. My curiosity got the best of me, and that is when I made a huge mistake. I tried to open the door. Blood-curdling screams unlike anything I've ever heard. I stumbled backwards, nearly losing my balance. Hello? Who's in there? There was no response, just screams. Are you okay? Do you need help? There was no doubt that I yelled loud enough for him to hear me, but he didn't want my help. He wanted me gone. I fumbled my way through the darkened room toward the exit. When I reached the top of the stairs, I just stood there, listening. Who would be alone inside that room? I finally left and I reported what I'd heard, but nothing came out of it. There was no sign of him the next month or even the next several months. I nearly given up on solving the mystery when a stroke of luck pulled me back in. One night I went to a concert with my friend Lara. After the show, I gave her a ride home. She just moved in, so she had to give me directions. I didn't pay much attention to where she was leading me until she pointed to a house a ways up the street. I couldn't believe it. She had moved into the house with the mysterious room in the basement. This may sound weird, but have you noticed anything odd about the basement at this? Yeah, a crazy guy lives down there. Finally, I had confirmation. She told me that even though she lived in the attic, she often heard him yelling late at night. She had actually met him. She saw him standing in the lawn. He stood perfectly still, with no expression on his face. Feeling a little creeped out, she just went in her car and left. And then, I finally met him myself. I entered the back door like I had before, but this time something was different. The light was on in the basement. I peered down the staircase, and at the bottom, a ragged-looking dog was staring back at me. Then, I noticed something else. Behind the dog, I could see a pair of bare feet. I should have left right then. At this point, my desire to finally get some answers outweighed my fear. I shakenly called out, meter reader. As I made my way down, more of him was revealed. He looked to be middle-aged. His head was shaved and his eyes were wild. I explained who I was and what I was doing there, and to my surprise, not only did he talk to me, but he actually sounded somewhat normal. I even started to doubt whether or not he was the same man I'd heard screaming. As I read the meters, he was constantly wringing his hands together and spastically cocking his head from side to side. The longer he talked, the more agitated he became. As I turned to head up the staircase, he could no longer hold it in. Screams, the very same unforgettable screams I'd heard coming from the locked room. I ran up the stairs as fast as my legs would carry me, flung the door open, and rushed back into the daylight. I told my friends about the experience, and when I finished telling my story, she told me about something she'd seen a week earlier. One day, she noticed lights flashing outside her window. She looked outside just in time to see police officers placing the man from the basement in the back seat of a squad car. She later found out from another tenant that he had attacked someone with a weapon, and that was the last they ever saw of him. I don't know what became of that man in the basement. I like to think that he got the help he needed. But maybe that's just because I'd rather not think about the alternative. In the late 90s, Rocky and his wife just got married and decided to dink it. Double income, no kids for a few years to save up for a down payment on a house. The dot-com bubble was still rising and he was a newly minted software developer. They rented an apartment in the new city that was listed for $950 a month. The landlord, Hank Wazowski, was a real estate agent who owned a 2-bedroom condo as an investment property. He seemed slightly amused by them. Clueless, young, newlywed couple. They filled out the rental agreement and the credit check. Hank looked at the credit application where Rocky listed his job title as software developer and his income, $75K. For a 23-year-old in his second year out of college in the late 1990s, this is a small fortune. I can't believe how much money you make. Rocky explained that they were saving to buy a house and that they were only going to stay in the apartment for a year. We might stay a few months after the term is over. Would month to month be okay after? Hank assured them that would be fine. When they saw him again another time, he kept mentioning he couldn't believe that's what software developers were making. It was awkward and Rocky gave a vague reply. A year later, they had found a house to buy, signed all the papers, and they were making plans to move. The new house wasn't going to be ready until 2 months after their rental lease was up, so Rocky called Hank to ask if they could, as discussed, simply extend the lease by 2 months before moving out. Hank assured him on the phone it would be no problem and he would send over an extension for them to sign. It arrived in the mail and it included a month-to-month clause and a $500 increase in the rent? Hank, why are you increasing the rent over 50%? That's too much. That's more than my new mortgage is gonna be. He was super condescending. Rocky, it's what the apartment goes for now. I would be losing money by renting it for less. Rocky tried to reason with him, but it was very clear he knew that they could afford the $500. You don't have to like it, Rocky. You just have to pay it. He swallowed his pride and wrote out the check for $1,450 each month. Hank had screwed him for over $1,000 and there was nothing he could do about it. What made it even more infuriating is that Rocky saw the ad Hank put in the paper after they moved out and he listed the apartment for rent at only $150 more than they had been paying originally. And still, it didn't rent. So a month later, he saw the same ad and he had lowered the price to $75 more than they had been paying. Fast forward about 5 years, one day out of the blue, Rocky overhears one of his co-workers, Phil. Hey Mike, I'm expecting someone to drop off some paperwork for me. If a Hank Wazowski asks for me, tell him I'll be right out. Rocky froze. Phil, how do you know that name Hank Wazowski? Phil explains that Hank is his real estate agent. Right then, the front door to the office opens, and in walks Hank Wazowski. Hank, this is my friend Rocky. I think you may have already met. Yeah, my wife and I were your tenants a few years ago. Remember the software developer who rented for a year saving to buy a house? Hank's eyes indicate he now remembers Rocky. Oh, of course. How are you doing? This is the early 2000s, so the real estate market is very strong and easy money for any agent. An agent getting 3% on a $600,000 sale on a house and the purchase is around $20,000 for his trouble. That's a good commission for the agent, isn't it? Hank's eyes flash, and Rocky can tell he remembers everything about him now. Hank deflects Rocky's question, saying it's complicated and tells Phil to send back the papers as soon as possible. He leaves, but not before Rocky said, "It was really good to see you again, Hank." Rocky, what was that all about? Phil noticed Rocky's passive-aggressive tone, so he tells him the whole story. Phil, you can't use this guy to sell your condo and buy a house. I'll help you find another real estate agent, just anyone but Hank. Phil said he's a little surprised at the story and has always known Hank as a straightforward guy. But I totally see him doing that to you, he admits. There's no way I could use him now. And then Phil's eyes lit up a bit. "Hey, what do you want me to say when I fire him?" They came up with a plan, and Rocky made sure there were some key phrases in Phil's repertoire. "Hi, Hank, it's Phil calling. Yeah, about that, I've decided to get some other quotes from other agents. I'm not going to sign with you." No, you shouldn't give a discount. You'd be losing money if you did that." "No, it has nothing to do with Rocky." "Well, you don't have to like it, Hank. You just have to accept it. Goodbye." And it was the greatest revenge Rocky could have ever imagined. Through a chance meeting years later, Rocky lost out on $20,000 in easy commissions, and the best part is, Hank absolutely knew it had everything to do with Rocky. Carrie's boyfriend had just inherited his aunt's house after she passed away. She was blind, so the house had speakers and wires around telling her, "Back door open, fridge open, back room window opened." Honestly, the robotic voice kind of freaked Carrie out, so the couple had to go through the house and remove tons of wires. After moving in, they got a puppy, and it was nice not being alone. Her boyfriend had to leave for the weekend because of work, so she stayed home. One day, Carrie was out walking with her puppy, and he started wagging near the fence. She turned, thinking he was making friends with a bird or critter again. But it was a man, tall, chubby, and unkempt, grinning at them. "What a cool dog," he shouted. "Thanks, he's a Native American Indian dog," she responded. "Oh, I have a rare breed too, see?" He then proceeded to point at a small Shih Tzu dog. "I see. Cool, you have a good one." Carrie started feeling uneasy. "Why don't I come over and let our dogs meet? Maybe we can do play dates. You're new in town, right? 'Cause the old lady there died?" Upset that he mentioned her boyfriend's aunt, and she was scared he wanted to come over. "I'm sorry, but I'm not looking to make friends right now. Have a good one." "Oh, come on, anytime's a good time to make new friends." And he proceeded to start bolting around the corner towards her direction. Carrie panicked. She grabbed her puppy from the ground and rushed to the house, locking all the doors. All exterior doors locked. House secure. Wait, I thought I removed all the wires. She hid behind the kitchen counter as it was the only place in the house with the windows and doors couldn't see. The puppy got angry and started nibbling her, but she made sure not to let him go because she was afraid this man wanted to steal her puppy. She hears someone opening her back gate to the yard, and she sees him. The man with the Hawaiian shirt is out there. He started looking at the windows and sliding door on the porch that looked into the kitchen. He tried the sliding door, grunting angrily when it wouldn't open. She was looking for her phone but realized that it was actually in the porch, and she hoped he wouldn't notice. Front door opened, unsecured, and immediately heard banging and scratching. She took this chance to make her way out to the sliding back door to grab her phone and ran back and locked it again. "Oh, there you are, I see you now." She just locked it, so it was okay, but she didn't know if he was going to shatter the glass. She held her phone up and said, "I called the police. They're on their way, and my cameras have your face, so please leave." He smiled and said, "You haven't called anyone yet. All I wanted was to play with your dog. You're such a tease." Carrie called 911 while he watched. She requested help, and they asked her to stay on the phone. He smiled. He held his hands up and left. The dispatch sent someone out, and she gave them a picture from her phone. However, the next day, there was no news of capture even though they said they would update her. So she stepped outside, and there he was, standing in the other yard, smiling at her. "Hey, you want to play today then?" He began laughing loudly. She ran inside, put her puppy away, and called the police again, and they said it would take time to arrive since last time it was a false alarm. Front screen door opened, unsecured. She ran to the sliding door and it was unlocked. She quickly locked it and heard banging on the side door. Carrie called her last hope for help, her boyfriend's mother, who lived a couple blocks down. The woman was a black belt and a boxer. She called her crying, and the mother rushed over, and all she heard from her kitchen was the scream, "If you don't leave, I'll be forced to take you down." She looked out her curtain and saw her and the man outside. He was holding something shiny in his back pocket. Her boyfriend's mother suddenly grabbed the man and kicked him in the ribs as hard as she could and made him drop to the ground. She screamed at Carrie and to call the cops again. "Tell them he has a knife, they'll come quicker." The cops arrived soon after and the man was arrested. Carrie asked them what he was doing. Was he planning to hurt my puppy? The officer told her, "You're naive if you thought this man wanted your puppy. He was after you, miss. He's a wanted criminal." Apparently, he was a suspect they couldn't find until now. Her boyfriend's mom stayed with Carrie over the night to make sure she was okay. A few days later, her boyfriend came back home, and he was updated on everything that happened. He proceeded to put up cameras and more security. He even put the speakers back into the house as well, as that voice was actually able to help protect Carrie that horrifying weekend. Carly was searching for a nice laptop to buy on Craigslist. She was looking, searching around until she came across one in perfect condition for an extremely affordable price. Carly was thrilled. A laptop for this price in perfect condition too? She immediately emailed the guy who was selling it, asking questions about the computer like the hardware specs, etc., just to make sure she wasn't getting scammed. He responded saying that it's hers. She was the first to respond to his offer, so Carly arranged a meeting to collect the laptop from him. Weirdly, he asked for her address, her name, and surname. Carly told him she's not exactly comfortable with giving her name and address to strangers. He seemed to be fine with it though. She was waiting for him at the university when suddenly, someone walks up to her. "Hey, are you Carly?" "Oh yeah, that's me. I have the laptop for you." "Awesome, thanks so much," she said. "Can I take a look at it?" After a brief check that everything on the laptop was working properly, she got the money out and the transaction was smooth. "Hey, I really appreciate it. I hope you have a nice day." "Thanks, you too." She left the university, went back home, and pretty much forgot about him. Everything was fine until this happened. Carly started doing her school project when she suddenly deleted one of her files by mistake. She opened the trash bin to get the file out and saw hundreds of photos of numerous girls. The photos had "My love" or "My darling" letterings near them, all circled with red marker. Carly thought that this guy must have been a dirty cheater, but then she discovered a creepy coincidence. All the girls looked exactly like her. She got scared and decided to take a walk. While she was walking at the park, she saw a tall figure in a black hood. Carly pretended not to see him, but she was tearing apart inside as the figure was getting closer and closer. She started picking up the pace, but the hooded man was right on her tail. Carly ran out of patience, left the park, and quickly hopped on the bus and made sure that this guy wasn't following her. When she was finally home, she called her brother over and told him about the creepy pictures and the scary figure she saw at the park. He calmed Carly down and she showed him the pictures on the laptop. He was absolutely disgusted. "What is wrong with this guy?" he said. Her brother was very familiar with computers and its mechanics, so he decided to check the laptop. He started doing something to it while Carly went to her room to take a nap. About an hour later, she heard a loud yell from outside. She got up, flustered, ran out the room, and found her brother sitting on the floor, looking at the laptop like it was some kind of monster. She noticed something on the floor. It was a tracker placed inside the laptop she bought from the man on Craigslist. Carly froze, and it was all adding up now. The laptop, the low price she bought it for, him asking for her full name and address. This guy placed the tracker in the laptop and he sold it to her so he could stalk her. And she was certain the scary figure she saw there was the same guy. Carly then realized that this whole week she was being stalked, never noticing anything. She and her brother rushed to the police immediately. They started asking her questions, but she realized that this guy's face was completely erased from her memory. She started to look him up on social media, but failed. The mysterious man she bought the laptop from on Craigslist suddenly vanished without a trace, and the police never contacted them again. To this day, Carly still thinks about that tracker placed inside the laptop, what he's been doing when he was following her, and what could have happened if she didn't leave the park immediately.